Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Great American Underdog, where we share stories of strength and success from real life underdogs. And today is not just a day of strength and success, but solutions and success. I'm honored to introduce this next guest as someone who is very important in my life, has been an incredible mentor, friend, and business partner who has had a tremendous impact on my life, both personally and professionally. He is the owner of Sandy Cerami Associates, SCA365 Recruiting, and the creator of the 7 Pillars strategy and 7 Pillars of Killer Business Development. Most importantly, though, he is an incredible husband, father, brother, son, and friend to many. And if you know him and you think you found a reason not to like him, I would say there's probably something wrong with you. It's my it's my honor to welcome none other than the Solutionist, Mr. Sandy Cerami. Sandy, what's going on, my brother?
My man, how are you? Marvelous, Ron Morvo. First of all, you give me something that's going to be impossibly difficult to live up to. But I could say the exact same thing about you. There's no accidents, as we say all the time, no coincidence. The fact that we get to do this together on a regular basis is divinity, in human form. So thank you.
Amen to that, man. I share the same sentiment. And, you have an incredible story. And I think that it just needs to be shared with people as many times as possible because it's a story of just perseverance, diligence, and just being a good, honorable, genuine, authentic person. Really is what creates such a great life of success for you, in my opinion, amongst other things. So, but just to start off, this is Great American Underdog, and we're going to be starting off episodes a little bit differently moving forward. Thank you to my fiance, Nicole Leanne, as you call her, Miss Nikki. The start off question here, just to get us rolling, would be what is your favorite underdog story, Sandy, and why? Whether it's fictional or non fictional, what's your favorite if you had to pick one?
Wow, man, that's what an awesome question. First of all, a nod to Miss Nikki, because that is an absolutely killer question. When I think of like great underdog stories, like I can think of a few. The first one that comes to mind for me is quite honestly Rudy, the story of Ken Rudiger, who was a like completely unexpected, phenomenon at the University of Notre Dame. But his story is incredible. I love everything about the drama in his story. And
Yeah.
truth be known, I used that story throughout the course of a sales meeting a number of times in the past, where I noted key moments in the movie where it was time for him to give up. And instead of giving up, he dug deeper and kept persisting. And as you said before, persevering to the point where he realized his dream. And I'll tell you, I topped that with getting a chance to meet him live and in person at one of my clients'
Oh,
businesses years ago. I took my son. Yeah, it was really cool. It was really
yeah.
cool. It's a great underdog story, but if I had to pick one, that's at the top of the list. And then I will tell you one other one that I love as well as Hoosiers.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
something about the movie Hoosiers that always hit me right in the heart. And Gene Hackman's one of my favorite actors, and he just does such an incredible job, in that movie. And his story and the story of the school itself is a great underdog story. So it's hard for me to pick one.
I can appreciate that, as you know, and like you mentioned, there's just something about underdog stories, and I think it's the little details about never giving up and persevering that make them special, and definitely Rudy and Hoosiers, you got to put it up there, in the top greats of underdog stories. Now,
I'll give you one more real life underdog story, buddy.
Sure.
Today's a special day for me, and I got to just wish my mom a happy birthday. She's 77 years old today. And as you know, she's had a tough run the last couple of months. But my mom is also a great underdog story, somebody that just has never given up in her life and has faced a lot of challenges. And so I would be remiss if I did not include her in my underdog story, along with her husband Al.
I love that, Sandy, as you
Yeah.
know. So thank you for sharing that. And
Yep.
now we're gonna get into your underdog story. And I just want to really start at the beginning of it for you, right? I always like to, and you know this about me, I like to know what makes people tick, right? How did they end up being the person they are, and what challenges did they ultimately overcome to get there? And I think that that's what the audience gets the most out of this podcast and the stories that we share. And your story is definitely one of those special ones. So talk to me about what was your upbringing like? Where did you grow up? And then we'll start there.
Well, that's a loaded question, buddy, as you know,
This is it.
because We were like nomads. We were like the Bedouin tribe of New Jersey. My sister, my mom, and myself early on. A byproduct of divorce. My parents split when I was very, very young. My sister and I were 4, 5, 6 years old when they split up and finally ultimately divorced. And so we grew up all over the place. We were all over northern New Jersey. We spent a little bit of time in South Jersey, and we went to a different town pretty often. I have counted up a number of times. And every once in a while, I'll like, oh yeah, we lived there too. But moved in my lifetime about 17 times,
Wow.
which most people shake their head at. But I will tell you, it was both a blessing and a curse. A curse because it was difficult to establish any sense of consistency and normalcy, but a blessing because I met so many people, and it really helped develop that love I have for getting to meet new people.
Wow. Yeah. I never thought of it that way because people would typically look at that and say, well, you moved a bunch of places. You didn't really get to make a lot of like, I guess, long term friends. Some people would argue, right? But in your case, it was kind
Yeah.
of the opposite, where you probably made not just long term friends, but you got to have an expansive group because of all the different cities.
It's incredible. I think about it very often. Social media has been a blessing in this regard. Its ability to connect us, right? And so people that I haven't seen or talked to in decades. When I said decades, I'm talking in some cases 35, 40 years since we've seen or talked to each other, but have been able to connect on Facebook, ironically. And so I really look back at all these people that I've had a chance to meet and get to know over the years and have renewed friendships and relationships with people that date back to elementary school. And at the ripe old age of 56, it's a daunting thing to think about, to be around this long and still have a connection to people that you met when you were 6, 7, 8 years of age.
Yeah, I think it's truly a blessing too in that regard that social media does have that ability to bring us together.
Yep.
And I would say 56 years young, always for you, sir. So I appreciate
Absolutely.
your humility always, as you know. Sandy, let me ask you, what were some of the earliest moments that you can remember that really helped shape your confidence early on and taught you that you were able to overcome challenges like moving?
Phew, man. So I don't know if I would call it confidence early on. To be honest with you, I would term it more a real uneasiness and a lack of confidence more than anything else. I mean, look, it's no joke. I have a name that's more normally associated with the opposite sex, for God's sakes. And so, as a young kid growing up, when you moved into a new town, when you were 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age, and you were the new kid in town, it was already a challenge, right? You were
Right.
walking into a new elementary school where all the kids had already been together for 3, 4, and 5 years. And then you had a girl's name coming into the mix. It was
Sure.
difficult. And so to answer your question, I would tell you that I had to make a decision because one thing I figured out as I got a little bit older and went to the next new town, I had two choices. I was either going to learn how to fight because that was a pretty regular occurrence when I got to a new school because of my name, or I was going to learn how to make friends. And what I will tell you is that early on, I chose the fight path
Yeah.
because it was instinctual. It was the first thing I thought of. It was like, if you're coming after me, my first instinct was to go back after you. And I knew that if I didn't fight back, I was going to have an awfully long school year. But here's what I also learned. I won a few and lost a few. And the ones that you lose, you remember, right? The ones you win are quickly forgotten very often because it's on to the next thing that you've got to, deal with. And I made a decision that I was going to figure out how to make friends more effectively so that I could circumvent the need to have to fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
it definitely does.
yeah, what I figured out was the quicker I could make people laugh, the quicker I was able to make a friend. And so I quickly became somebody that learned how to get people to smile and make them laugh. And that led me down a path that quite honestly didn't exactly highlight the academic prowess for me, but it did get me into a little bit of trouble, but it also kept me out of a lot of trouble in many ways as well.
Sure. Well, Sandy, you and I, although growing up at different times, share a lot of parallels in that way. I was Ronald, so I was Ronald McDonald. And instead
I,
of fighting
yeah,
people, although I didn't move, instead of fighting people, I was like, well, I could take away, like you take away a bully's power when you take away what they're picking on you about, right? So for you and
absolutely.
me, it was, well, if I'm likable and people like me, they're not going to want to pick on me as much. As a kid, that's an easy way to avoid the altercation of potentially
Absolutely.
fighting them over it. So I totally get that. So it's not necessarily like you said, not necessarily building that confidence, but you found a way of maneuvering around some obstacles early on as you moved around by just, again, fostering kind of the power of relationships and being able to communicate with people and make them laugh.
Well, it was a lot more fun, right? When you think about it, like, well, what's more fun, having to get into a fist fight every single day, or to have a chance to sit around and laugh with people that you can turn into a friend? And the answer is easy to spot. It's the latter, not the former. And so
Yeah.
that's the path that I chose. And it has served me well in many regards, right up until this very day.
Did you get that idea from anybody in particular? Like, was it your father, grandfather, mom, somebody in your family, or did it just kind of come naturally to you?
The answer is yes. Totally involved. It was my dad. My dad and mom are both very, very bright, or my dad was very bright, smart, funny as hell, had a
Yeah.
great sense of humor. They're both good people. And so they like people, they like to help other people. And so there was a very affable environment for me, in spite of the fact that they weren't very affable with each other early on when they split up. Separately, they were affable, funny people. They had great senses of humor. And I figured out on my own pretty quickly, like that if I could harness that, the ability to make a friend and make people laugh, it was going to be a much easier experience for me, for
Sure.
sure.
Absolutely. So, in regards to your dad and I'd say your grandfather, your mom, they definitely helped shape who you became as you got into your teenage years, things like
Mhm.
that. What were some of your earliest takeaways from family that kind of helped you overcome some early obstacles in your life?
Well, it depends on, what part of that experience we isolate and talk about. But I can tell you, like, I was a kid that got into some trouble. There's no question about that. I certainly had a nose for doing some things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. I don't know
Sure.
why. It was just a sense of adventure. And a lot of times I was bored. I remember being very bored in school. And again, when you're hopping around from school to school to school, and we were latchkey kids at that point in time, to be honest with you. So we were kind of on our own. My mom was working, my dad was working, my
Right.
sister were on our own. And so some lessons learned. Self, I think independence, right? Being able to be self-sufficient, get yourself home from school, get yourself something to eat, get your, when I decided to do homework, which wasn't very often, get your homework done without having to be told. Those lessons early on, I think, were as a result of how I was brought up, right? Now,
Sure.
today, you wouldn't think of allowing your kid to walk, 2 miles to and from school by themselves. But back in those days, I mean, we walked 2.5 miles
Yeah.
to and from school, every single day. And there wasn't a huge concern like we have today. I shouldn't even say that. Probably it was a lack of awareness more than anything else back then. I could tell you from a work ethic perspective, I started to work with my dad at the dealership on Saturdays when I was a young kid, like being 8, 9 years of age. And I would go to the dealership with him on a Saturday to work. And they put me to work. I mean, I was cleaning
Yeah.
bathrooms. I was, scrubbing wheels and tires, sweeping the floors, wiping down cars on the showroom floor. My dad would pay me in cash.
Oh,
And I
cool.
liked money because there were things I liked. I liked candy as a kid. I liked comic books. There was a store right down at the end of my street. And so, if I wanted to get something, I had to have a couple of bucks in my pocket. So I always enjoyed the experience of doing work and earning money. I was helping friends out that had paper routes. I sold flags in 1976. I was 9 years old. I was selling bicentennial flags house to house. We would buy the flags for $15 and sell them for 20 back
Awesome.
then, and we would keep the
Nice job.
profit. Okay. We sold knives, steak knives, door to door as kids. I can remember selling for school. Like if we had to raise money for school, anytime I had a chance to get out and sell, I used to enjoy that for some reason. I don't know what it was. I think it was really the thrill of the chase and the adventure of the sale that I enjoyed, but I enjoyed doing that at a very young age. I enjoyed the work ethic piece and I really enjoyed the chase and the adventure of the sale.
That's very interesting to me because obviously knowing you and knowing you grew up in the dealership world, it sounds like you weren't necessarily early on in your life enthralled about working in automotive and around the cars as much as the core lesson you really learned was if I work hard, I'll be rewarded. And then being able to do
100%.
that and combine that with your ability to build relationships, make people laugh, kind of just fused together, whether you realized it or not, but from an early age.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this. Like, when it comes to the mechanical piece of the car business, I am completely lost. People laugh all the time when they start barking, a lot of the gearhead stuff at me, and I have no idea what they're talking about. For me, it was always the people
Right.
piece of it. I I can remember enjoying as a kid the action on a showroom floor on a Saturday. I can remember, sneaking up and I would be looking through the railing and just watching everything that was going on the showroom floor. And I would always notice the way that people were having a good time at the desk with the salesperson or having a good time, getting in and out of the brand new cars. There was just something about that experience that was magnetic for me. And I couldn't get enough of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so was that what really sparked, I guess, the want to continue in the family business and build a long-term career in the automotive industry? Because I've also heard you talk about that in the past, right? Where the showroom floor, there's energy out there, there's
Yeah.
engagement, people are having a good time when things are going good and finding a car that they like.
Yep.
Did that is that what really caught your attention to automotive specifically to make you want to go in that direction rather than, not everybody follows their family businesses and takes their own path. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that had a lot to do with it. I also think that I had a tremendous sense of connection to both my dad and my grandfather. I come from a family that's, Irish, Italian, and Dutch, more Italian than anything else. And so, the old, grandfather, father, and son, three generation thing was important to me. I enjoyed that. It was something I really respected a great deal. I understood the dynamic between the three of us. That dynamic transformed over time. Obviously, as I got older and more mature, I was able to identify some of the challenges, the inherent challenges of a family business. But I enjoyed the action. I enjoyed the energy of the business itself. And I also was attracted to the legacy and the tradition of a third generation coming into the business. It was a tremendous sense of obligation and responsibility as far as I saw it in that regard. But the caveat, quite honestly, is that I enjoyed it. Like I really had a great time and experienced nothing but incredibly fun. And I would say action packed is putting it mildly, because as you know, we experienced both the best and the worst of it. But I wouldn't change a thing. It taught me incredible lessons about having to understand how people think, why they think the way that they think, why they do the things that they do. And that's both from a business perspective and also from a family business perspective.
For sure. Who was your earliest professional mentor, Sandy? I know obviously probably coming from the dealership. I know your dad and grandfather for sure, but who else as well, or who was your biggest one?
I mean, I can tell you right now, the single biggest impact on me professionally early on was Ed Abrazizi, our general manager. I have breakfast with him every once in a while. As a matter of fact, I'm having breakfast with him tomorrow morning because we're
Yes.
overdue. Ed was much different in terms of an influence on me than anybody else that I had in my life at that point in time. I was a wild child. I know it. I look back on it and I say to my mom all the time, I'm sorry, because I'm sure that I was the cause of a lot of pain and grief for her, and not intentionally, just because I was that kid that was always just doing his thing and
Yeah.
pushing the envelope and pushing the boundaries. And I would take enough of it seriously where when it was important to me, I would take it seriously. If it was stuff that I just didn't see the level of importance long term, then I really had a hard time, staying coloring within the lines, if you will. And so
Sure.
Ed was much different. Ed was a very, very specific operator. Ed was detailed. He was disciplined. One of the funniest people you ever meet in your life. But Ed did things the right way, and he expected you to do things the right way. And there was no complaining about anything. As a matter of fact, he was not just a professional influence on me. He influenced how I live my life today and still to this day, and decisions that I might think about. How would Ed be
How
thinking
would Ed
about a
do that?
decision like this? It's incredible. And we've had our ups and downs. I will tell you that. We've had our ups and downs, both professionally and personally, over the course of a 30+ year relationship. But he is probably the single biggest influence outside of my dad, my grandfather, and my mom.
Yeah, and I think having a well-rounded group of mentors, as you know, is so important to anybody going through obstacles and challenges. It
Hmm.
definitely can shape you and shape your life as it has for you. It has for me. From a professional standpoint with you, it's like, how would Sandy handle this situation?
Hmm.
What kind of questions would he be asking? And having those kind of mentors in our lives definitely help us when we're going against insurmountable odds or challenges. So yeah, no, that makes total sense. And then Sandy, talk to me about, what happened, for you to eventually transition into running the dealership, right? And I know that you sat in almost every chair in the dealership, you've done every job. I know you've mentioned before being a service advisor was probably one of your favorites, But talk to me a little bit about, how did that transition happen?
So transitioning into to operating and owning the dealership is probably the towards the end of the story. But early on, as I mentioned, like the first thing I did was clean the bathrooms. And that's literally what my dad had me do. And he and Ed, were on the same page with respect to that. My dad was very wise in that regard. He gave it a very hands-off approach and he put me into Ed's care, to in essence raise me in the business and teach me the things and really hold me accountable in a way that a dad maybe sometimes can't without causing, crossover conflict.
Sure.
I did everything from, cleaning bathrooms, pushing a broom, cleaning the windows, wiping down the showroom floor cars, working in the parts department as a parts clerk, parts manager. Steve Muncies is still a good friend of mine. I tortured that poor man for an entire summer. As you know, I love to joke around and scare people once in a while. I used to hide behind full-size body panels and wait for him to come walking by and scare the living hell out of that poor man. But he taught me a lot about, the fundamentals of parts. I had an opportunity to go in and work in the new car prep department. That's as close as I ever got to turning a wrench. I mean, I was not doing anything that required diagnostics. I was,
Or
making sure the radio stations were tuned. I could drill holes into the bumpers to put the license plate
right.
frames and license plate brackets there. Undercoated cars, cleaned out the oil water separator. That was always a pleasant job. That was about as disgusting a dirty job as
Oh
Mike Rowe
yeah,
will ever show you. I promise you, it is just the most heinous experience in the world.
I'm
Did
sure.
that more than once. And then, was a car jockey, worked my way into the service department as a service advisor and dispatcher, had an incredible experience there. That was, yeah, I really enjoyed the service advisor experience because it was a chance to roll up my sleeves and I didn't use my last name. And the reason I didn't use my last name was because we wanted people to be honest with me. If they had
Right.
a complaint, we wanted them to tell us how they really felt. And a lot of times people will stop short of telling you 100% of how they feel if they feel as though they're insulting you. Now, some people in in the
We're very
dirty
smart.
journal,
Always, yeah.
they're looking for the person with the last name, right? But the truth of the matter is it was my opportunity to learn how to serve people effectively and learn how to take a punch in terms of customer service and client care. And so those 2.5 years in the service drive were about as rewarding as a period of time as I spent in my career developmentally as there was. And then from there, I had a chance to go upstairs and sell on the showroom floor. Had a
That's
chance to sit in the F&I box for a little over 5 years. Work the sales desk, and then ultimately went in 1995, 96 to the NADA General Dealership Management Academy, which was incredible. Learned how to read a financial statement effectively, which was not something I had done previously. And that really gave me the foundation to understand dealership operations, both from a boots on the ground, hand to hand, day to day combat perspective, as well as that 30,000 foot perspective and really tie the two together. It's one thing to read a financial statement and know the numbers. It's another thing to know how to get those numbers to move effectively in the right
right.
direction or to stop them from, moving in the wrong direction. And that's about as easy a summary as I can give you, throughout my career.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting. Go once you got into a client-facing role, let's say, like with the service advisor piece, you've taught me in the past the four different types of people, right? You want to be liked, you want to win, you want to be right, you want to be comfortable. And throughout your life in your younger years, it was like, okay, if I can get people to like me, that's cool. But when you
Yep.
go to actually sell and you start building yourself as a professional, it becomes less about not just being liked, but also helping the client. So, did you find that at that time, like finding those win-win situations? Did you recognize that early on in your life that that's what you needed to do to find success with clients, or was it something different? Did it just speak to you, because of the person you are?
Man, I think a little bit of all of that, I was really mentored by three incredible guys, my grandfather, my
Yeah.
dad, and Ed. And they taught me so many valuable lessons about people and about how people think and what perception is. I also had this intuitive, innate understanding of people. And I think because I think I was born an empath, so I feel other people's, challenges and I feel their elation. I'd love to share that with folks and I'll take on somebody's pain, if you will, if
Right.
I think it'll help a situation. And I learned how to do that and empathize with folks pretty early on. and create win-win scenarios where if I had to lose a little bit in order for them to win and ultimately we all won together in the end, I understood the fluid dynamic of that type of a relationship and how that math worked, if you will, from a business perspective. And I think that's something that has translated into just relationships in general. At the end of the day, for any of us to succeed, whether we're talking about selling something, leading something, changing something, whatever the case may be, it's usually driven by the dynamics of great relationships. And so that was something that I started to figure out pretty early on because of the mentoring influence of the three guys that I mentioned, but also because I just felt that innately inside and experienced it quite honestly, moving from town to town to town. How do you get along with people? You build relationships.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, as you know. So, and then now we're going to fast forward a little bit. You take over the dealership. You could go back whenever you need to. You take over the dealership. You had years of success running it with Mary, your wife, from my understanding. And then 08, 09, something happens that's completely out of our control. Talk to me about what happened with General Motors in 08, 09, and how did that end up impacting you and the business ultimately?
Mhm. Well, I think we have to digress. There was something that happened prior to that in May of 2001. My grandfather passed away at the age of 88, almost 89 years. He was a tough, tough guy. He had been through a lot. My grandfather was out of his house in the sixth grade, 12 years of age, never graduated sixth grade, 12 years of age, living in an attic, literally
Wow.
subsisting on a stale roll and a pickle from this old German woman that took him in. His
Wow.
mother had passed away from childbirth, and he just had a really tough, tough life until he met my grandmother. And he was a guy that never thought he was going to die. He had lung cancer for like almost 4 years, right? And
Wow.
he smoked all the way through. Nobody
Hey,
knew, with the exception of myself, my dad, and Ed, were the only ones that knew that he continued to smoke even when he was diagnosed with lung cancer. I would catch him all the time smoking outside of a storefront, picking up his dry cleaning or something like that. And he'd cup the cigarette, think that I didn't see it. He was just that guy. You weren't changing him. And so in 2001, he passes away. And without airing a lot of dirty laundry, there was a lot of family involved, and everybody had a different idea of what was the right thing to do and what was owed to who. And yeah, that spurred almost 2 years of conflict and turmoil. In September of 2001, we lost our floor plan source. So anybody that's been in the automobile business knows that no floor plan source, you should be out of business.
right.
We were able to literally buy cars one at a time. We would sell them and deliver them. And we stayed in business because we had a great, incredibly loyal team of people. Too many to mention, but I mean, when I think about Ed Aberzizi and Steve Mutzies and certainly really probably the most important person for me, Regina Kinsella, our controller, and so many other folks that helped us, Marie Pajoli, my buddy John Myers. I mean, helped us weather that storm. We put Humpty Dumpty back together again, albeit with a significantly higher expense structure than we had been used to up until that point in time. But it was what it was. And what it did was, and this is a funny thing, and I'm going to tell you this because this is only the second time I'm articulating it this way. People say to me all the time, why did you stay? Why did you stick it out? Why didn't you just move on at that point in your career? And the answer, truthfully, is because I was afraid to. I had this incredible fear of who was I without the dealership and without my dream of becoming a dealer principal, which is always what I had dreamt since a very early age. And I was a two-time college failure. I was not the greatest student in the world. I had a wife and my son at that point in time. And so I was quite honestly afraid to figure out what life was going to be like without the dealership and without my dream of being a car dealer. And so I fought.
Yeah.
Sometimes you fight because of fear and sometimes you fight because of the dream. And for me, it was a little bit of both. We put Humpty Dumpty back together again. We had a really a solid run for a bunch of years, but in 2007, the economy started to falter. In 2008, it took a complete nosedive. You had Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers in a puff of smoke
Yeah.
in September of 2008. We had finally struck a deal with General Motors at that point in time. We were trying to move our location because the rent was just crushing us at that point. And so we could not get that done. And we came to an agreement with General Motors for them to buy the franchises back. And so we made a deal in November of 2008. and we made the announcement. I had a very tough time making the announcement, which was Black Friday of 2008, the day after
Wow.
Thanksgiving.
Oh,
And I wanted to be honest with people because it had been a really rough year. We waited December 1st. We shut the doors after 52 years in business. And we were waiting for General Motors to show up to pick up our cars, our parts, our essential tools, all the things that were included in our deal with them.
yeah.
And little did we know that, come February of the following year, 2009, they would formally announce that GM bankruptcy proceeding. And so we were left with all of our parts and we left with our deal in shambles. We sold our parts for 12 cents on the dollar. We had $300,000 in parts, sold them for 12 cents on the dollar, buddy. Probably $150,000 in essential tools, got nothing for those. We sat with the inventory because I was obligated. I was what's called cross collateralized on the inventory with
Okay.
General Motors Acceptance Corp. I was paying out all of the interest on the cars, even though we had no functioning dealership in place from December 1st until the middle of May. It basically took us to the point where I was overdrawn in all of my checking accounts, my two business accounts, and my personal account, and the house is in foreclosure. I mean, I get choked up when I think about it still today because if
Yeah.
not for my wife, Mary, I'm probably not here, buddy.
There's a lot to unpack, obviously, in what you said. The first thing you mentioned to me that I've never heard you articulate it this way is the fear and the dream is what kept you going. It's like, and I kind of get that in even like the boxing world, right? Like the dream
Mhm.
of achieving in sports. Forget about me, but in sports in general, right? And also the fear of what if I don't do it? Will I look back and have regrets? Or it's part of my identity, right? So
Mhm.
I think that that's the first thing that I think is really incredible that kept you going. And then more importantly, moving forward, what kept you from not giving up was obviously it's family business. There's a legacy tied to that. And
Mhm.
then what kept you positive? You mentioned Mary as being that positive light and that source. How did you keep a positive mindset? And how did those people like Mary really come to back you in those tougher times?
There's only one way for me to put this. I was not a positive person at that stage. I was angry.
Okay.
I was I was disappointed in myself. I felt like an abject failure. I sat in my car one day and really I was like doing that garden hose in the exhaust pipe thing in my head, and thinking about Mary and the kids was really the thing that stopped me from making a really terrible decision at that point in time. I had people like Mary. I had people like my dad. I had people like my mom, my sister, Regina. Mary's family were incredible. Seeing my kids every day, I will say this to you, like walking through the door, no matter how bad a day I had, when I walked through the door, Mary was still there. Mary was like the rock, is the rock. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that like Dwayne Johnson. I mean like Mary is the rock. She's the GOAT for
Love it.
sure. And then my kids were at that stage in life where they would run up to me. Man, I could have said, guys, I just, shot the president, come up and hug me. They would have cared.
Yeah.
It literally could have been that crazy. And my kids would have run up to me and been
Right.
excited to see me. But I got to the point in May of 2015, excuse me, May of 2009,
Yeah.
where I was like, it was May 15th. And I was sitting in my car and I hadn't told Mary how bad it was. She knew it was bad, but hadn't told her how bad. And I literally had tears streaming down my cheeks and walked in the back door of the house. And she's like, what's going on? And I said, honey, we're broke and I'm broken and I don't know what to do. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, house is in foreclosure. I got no more money. Like, I don't know where to go, what to do. And Mary was great. She's like, you need to stop crying. You
Mhm.
need to turn around. You're a smart guy. And she says, I believe in you. And I will never, ever forget, like when she said that to me, I don't think she realized what she said to me or how it impacted me.
Right.
But those 4 words were like unbelievable to me because I was like, how in the world for someone that knows every single thing about me, can she say that she believes in me? I just failed like across the board miserably. And, you tell me you believe in me. She goes, you got to figure this out. You need to go figure this out. And I literally turned around. I had $11 in my pocket. And told this story more than once. I had $11. I had a $5 bill that I wrapped around 6 singles, and that was it. I was overdrawn in all my other accounts. I had the change in the drawer of my 2006 Cadillac CTS, and
Yeah.
I went to Starbucks. I grabbed a cup of coffee, cleaned me out of half of my bankroll, And I wrote the business plan for the business that basically started where we're at today. And it's been incredible. I will tell you that the lessons that I learned in the failures that I've experienced and brought upon myself in a lot of ways have been what has taught me the most valuable lessons in my life for certain.
Would you say from a personal and even professional standpoint that that was your lowest moment where that was like as an underdog in your own story, that was the start, those lowest moments end up being the starts of our growth, right? We experience most growth when we
Yeah.
fail. And sometimes it's not even in our control, but we, like you, and like me, we take it to heart. What advice would you give to somebody that's at that low point, just like you were, and then starting over again? What would you tell them to do?
I don't think anybody could say it any better than Jim Valvano did in his incredible speech at the ESPYs when he talks about don't give up, don't ever give up. And it sounds so cliche, but the truth of the matter is that our ability to just say no to the give up piece of it
Mm,
is everything. Because here's what I can tell you. Was it the lowest point of my life? I don't know. I've had plenty. I think everybody does. Anybody that's honest with you will tell you they've had really low points in their life. The ones that don't want to tell you about those are lying about other things too, for the record.
sure.
And I think I'll have other low points to experience in life as we go forward. I'll experience, disappointment and despair and low points as I move forward in my life. I think learning how to keep going in spite of those is the greatest lesson that I've learned and that anybody can learn, which is keep on going. Just keep on trying to figure it out. You have to keep trying. As long as you're doing that, you're in the game. And that's how I feel. I feel like if I'm out doing something productive, then I'm still in the game. And a lot of things that we figure out in a very serendipitous fashion. Something will happen that we don't expect. And we have one of those aha moments. And then it's wash, rinse, repeat from that point forward.
Yeah. So it's really just, again, like you said, never give up, never surrender kind of mentality. That sometimes is hard to develop though, too, Sandy, right? But if you have the right people around you that also believe in
Right
you,
there.
that's
You
what
just
it's
said it.
yeah.
It's who are you surrounding yourself with? Who can you pick up the phone and call? Who isn't going to judge you? Who's going to listen to you? Who's going to serve to inspire you no matter where you are in your life? What can you plug into your ears? What can you read? What can you listen to? What can you watch that's going to inspire hope in you? Because
Yeah.
it's like this, it's this path. It's this you go when you start to come out of despair or desperation, you find hope. Hope is the first thing that you should seek. I seek hope. And from there, you seek some inspiration and then you put a little work behind it. And then you have what we call the faith to allow all the things that you're doing to allow the results to catch up with them. And we talk
Right.
about it all the time. You've got to play that long game. No one is defined by one failure or success in their life. Okay. I know people like to do that. Societally, we like to do that. But the truth is that very few people are defined by one individual failure or one individual success in their life. The greatest stories that are ever told about the people that have had the most impact and influence in this world are told as a series of ups and downs, a series of dramatic effects in their life. And it's always, the greatest of his success and the, most epic of failures. And you've
Sure.
got to understand there's going to be a balance of the two in your life.
Yeah. And there's a lot of meat and potatoes in between both those points on the grid, and
100%.
like you said, that can happen multiple times throughout your life. So it's such a
Yeah.
great point. When you started Sandy Cerami and Associates, Sandy, what was like some of your earliest wins that gave you that hope? And what was it that, that you caught on, like grasped and said, you know what? I think I can do this. You started telling yourself that.
I think when I learned how to ask the right questions the right way, where I was able to let people know that they could trust me and have confidence, that they could share with me some of their innermost weaknesses or challenges or doubts as a business owner, and then seek objective third party counsel as to how they might better address them or solve the challenge. I think it changed everything for me because what it helped me realize was that it's not so much for me that I'm smarter than anybody that I work with. That's definitely not the case. I advise and work with some of the smartest people around, far
Yeah.
smarter than me, far more experienced in many cases, and far higher IQ. But what I learned along the way early on was that the value that I bring is having a different perspective, an objective perspective, if you will, and having a multitude of experiences that I can share with them that will give them a little bit different perspective and help create solutions for them to solve the challenges that they're facing. And that was an incredible confidence booster for me. It gave me the pause to sit back and I don't get nervous ever sitting across from anybody at this point. I don't care if they're worth $1, $100 million, or $1 billion. They're human beings and
Yeah.
they're faced with the same challenges as everyone else is. And so I realized that pretty early on with Sandy Cerami Associates. The value is our ability to listen, to help identify objective solutions, and
Yeah.
then help them execute on them.
I don't even necessarily think that it's not that you quote unquote don't get nervous. I think it's your maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it's your just ability to handle that. Because I always, again, another parallel with boxing for me is like everybody's nervous walking into the ring, right? But at a certain point from practice, repetition, speaking with people, and also in the business world, and we talk about this all the time, you genuinely care about somebody's end result, right? Or
100%.
whatever they're trying to move away from. So I think that that takes away the feelings of even wanting to be nervous. And for me in boxing, it's like, yeah, it's another human across from me at the end of the day. Like there's only so much that bad that could potentially happen there, right? But
Mhm.
in the world of business, it's like, well, the nerves kind of go away when you're
Right.
more concerned about making a difference for them than what am I
Bingo.
bringing to the table?
You just nailed it. You just nailed it. And that's it in a nutshell, is that it's never about me or it's never about us. It's always about what's best for the person that we're sitting across from, that's seeking our counsel, that's seeking our advice, or seeking for us to come in and help them execute on a game plan. It's always about them. It's always more about them than it'll ever be about us because, ultimately, as you and I both know, if they don't win, we don't win. And
Yeah.
I win. I don't want to lose in life. And at the end of the day, if that's how we approach each and every person or entity or business that we're working with, it becomes very simple to sit down and have these conversations.
How do you, Sandy, in business and in life, how do you measure success?
Well, I can tell you that there are a number of metrics, right? So the first measurement for me is, am I doing the right thing? Like that is the first and most important metric that I look at. Are we doing the right thing, right? The right way? Are we doing the right thing the right way? The second thing we look at is, are we achieving the kind of outcomes that our clients are looking for on the business side? And ultimately, am I making progress in my own life as it relates to creating incredible relationships, friendships, and bonds with people that I love and care about? Certainly the financial success plays a piece of it as well. I don't have an appetite. I don't need to have, my own 747. It would be nice. I'm telling you that if it happens, fantastic. But I don't wake up every single day saying that life is a success or a failure because I do or I don't have my own private 747 or, some island that I own in the Caribbean. That's
Yeah.
not what drives me. What really drives me is, I'm going to say it this way. When the day comes that I'm no longer here, I hope that when people are thinking about me, the first thing they do is they smile about the times that we've shared together and aren't thinking about the business relationship that we've had. That human piece of it is what they remember fondly. And as it relates to my family, I hope that they're just proud of everything that I did. And maybe the things that they look at and say, well, why'd he do those things? They understand that I did them because I cared about and loved them more than
Yeah.
anything else. That to me is a successful
Wow.
life. When my dad passed away, I'm going to tell you something real quick. When my dad passed away, my dad wasn't a multi millionaire. He was a successful businessman. But when he passed away, his wake was about 5 hours long. And it was the line of people, and the people that came to see him dated back 60 and 70 years in his life that came to pay
Wow.
respects to him. And it left an indelible impression upon my heart and my soul. And it spoke to me a lot about who my dad was. And I aspire to hopefully have a scintilla of that mark left on the world when I leave.
Well, I could say, for certain, just from my standpoint, just when you were explaining that, I got choked up because, the audience might not know, and maybe they do by now, but we work directly together, Sandy and I, daily. And the impact you've had on my life personally and professionally, even like I just said in the intro, the legacy that you want to leave isn't driven by financials. And I love that about you. And I
Yeah.
think that success is really ultimately the difference we make in other people's lives. And I can tell you for sure that you made a difference, not just in my life, but from a lot of people around us, including obviously your family, but friends, business colleagues, etc. So I love that measure of success, man. And yeah, the amount of people that remember you in a positive light and what you brought to them in their lives is really what measures success for me as well. So I would say that's also probably
Great.
your big victory in life. If you had to choose something in life and business
So,
is making a difference.
well, I would say the feeling is mutual, buddy. I feel much the same way about you. And I say to you all the time, there's no accidents, no coincidence. The fact that we're together doing what we do, I go back to the first time that we ever met each other. And
Yeah.
I knew at that moment in time, and I said it to you, like, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to stay connected because we're going to do something in the future. And you remember that moment. I do like it was yesterday.
Me
So,
too. Yeah, and the Post-it board, everything, of course, so you can always talk
yeah,
about that. I do wanna get back to, the entrepreneurial piece, right? And I
sure.
wanna actually switch gears a little bit, to 7P. At this point at Sandy Cerami Associates, we have Academy 365 that's on the way, and we have the 7 pillars, which we've been helping businesses with for some time now. But just for the audience, talk to me a little bit about what is the 7 pillars, right? What makes it different than what other people might get on the market out there?
So as you and I both know, there is no shortage of, those, I'll call them the self-proclaimed sales gurus on social media these days that are screaming into your mobile phone or tablet or your laptop screen, talking about closing. They're all about closing, and you've got to be more like them if you ever want to succeed. And it's a message that just grates on me because I really find it personally, it's offensive to me because I want people to be themselves, them genuine, authentic selves, so that they don't have to feel like they're pretending when they're out there in the marketplace professionally.
Yeah.
And so when I looked at what the traditional sales training was all about, it was really manipulative. And sales training was very rote. There were the steps to the sale and all the word tracks and things that we would traditionally learn to succeed in sales. And I think that the world has evolved, that has really matured at this stage of the game. Now, there's some of the things, some of the elements of traditional selling that will never change, no question about it. But I think when we talk about what the 7 pillars and the 7P strategy is all about, it's really about combining the very best practices of sales and marketing and branding for individuals and for businesses. And so we incorporate things like making sure we've got the right kind of a winning mindset. And winning mindset is not a zero sum mindset, which means we win, they lose. All
No.
right. The winning mindset is how to create win-win scenarios out in the marketplace and really focus on developing ourselves personally and professionally by investing in ourselves to become the very best version of who we are and who we are meant to be in this life. And so the fundamental foundation starts with becoming the very best, most genuine, authentic version of who you are personally and professionally. Then we talk about how do we use things like social media and non-traditional marketing and advertising in order to develop a brand in the marketplace that is respected, trusted, and admired so that we can ultimately become the most trusted resource in the marketplace, right? Whether you're an individual, small business, a mid cap, or even a large business, it
Right.
really makes no difference. What you really need to become is the most trusted resource in the marketplace, the resource that people turn to when they don't know who to call or what to do. All right. As you say with me all the time, that's when your phone rings and your email or your private message inbox dings. That happens when you're the most trusted resource. We teach people how to have real world, real life conversations and convert those into client opportunities long term. We're not walking up to them and say, hey, let's do business. It's getting to know the person or getting to know the company or the organization in a way that helps us identify ways that we can go out and be of service to them. Figuring out how to create those win-win scenarios so that we have shared outcomes, right? So that the
Right.
objectives that we're out there chasing are things that will benefit everybody involved. And again, isn't that zero sum, we win, they lose, or they win, their client loses. We want to create scenarios where it's really easy to get to yes, and we can start to build this incredible coalition amongst us, our clients, and then ultimately our clients' clients along the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it just comes down to the relationship element rather than trying to strong arm people and close them.
100%.
And it's not just sales, right? Like you mentioned, it's branding, marketing, building a personal brand, an audience that follows you to solve a problem for them, educate them, nurture them, bring value. And we do every day in our own business, right?
Yep.
Again, for those ways of creating like win opportunities with clients, I think it's
Yeah.
genius.
When I take a look at there's two people that I have really uh, paid close attention to the last year or so, and that is John Maxwell and Simon Sinek, two guys that speak a lot about leadership and the parallels that I see between a strong leader and a strong selling professional are undeniable. And I see, incredible intersection between those two disciplines, selling or business development, if you will, which I think is a much more elevated profession than just selling itself, and leadership. And I've taken a lot of cues. We've taken a lot of cues, you and I, from both Simon Sinek and John Maxwell
Right.
and leadership as it relates to selling.
What do you think, in your opinion, is the number one fear that most selling professionals or maybe future leaders have that keeps them from reaching higher levels of success in sales and leadership? What do you think their number one fear is?
I mean, there's a couple of them. I don't know that I could give you one, but I can give you the three, four, five that I think are prevalent. The
Okay.
first one, fear of failure. There's certainly an incredible fear of failing, and so it becomes easier not to try than to try and fail. When you take a look at that from a logic based perspective, it's completely illogical, right? You are
Yeah.
guaranteed to fail. Okay, don't try. I think sometimes the fear of success, people are afraid to succeed because holy cow, now they're going to expect me to do it again. Right. And
Right.
so it's a fear of failure, fear of success, the fear of being judged. And
Wow.
that may be number one for a
Right.
lot of folks, the fear of what are people going to say? What are people going to think? And I think, you do have to be cognizant and you have to be aware of that, but I don't think you can allow it to inhibit you and to stop you. I think you have
Yeah.
to get past that from my own experience and stop worrying about what people are thinking, what people are saying, because the ones that are thinking and saying are really the ones that matter the least.
Yeah. And
Makes
most
sense?
of the time, the people that are our target audience or who we're trying to actually help, more importantly, which is people in general,
Yeah,
they're not thinking about us like we think they're thinking about us either, right?
absolutely.
Like, they're totally not. And I think that back to one of the original things you said earlier in our conversation, Sandy, is the never give up element, right? Like, if
Yep.
you're willing to just do a little bit more every single day, you play that long game. I think that that's ultimately how you overcome a lot of these things because you start to have these realizations. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. I think that what you find from, as I referenced those self-anointed sales gurus out there, they talk about competition all the time. They're going to destroy the competition. You got to
Right.
dominate. You know how I feel about that. I think it's the absolute biggest line of shit that I've ever heard.
Yep.
I think it is all about competing with ourselves. It's all about competing with sometimes the voice of the devil that can get inside of our heads from time to time and really play games. That 6-inch space in between our ears can be either the most fertile soil that will plant a great idea in, or it becomes that minefield of despair, doubt, and destitution. And you've got to be really careful what you're telling yourself on a daily basis. I know that from experience. That's why it becomes so important you really need to deluge your senses, right? Your eyes and your ears with positive messages, with positive influences, with positive people, because the negative is so strong and it's so easy to fall victim to that the only antidote out there is positive.
Right. Yeah, so actually taking the time, because one of the things I definitely want to say was like, what's your biggest piece of advice for people being resilient? And I think you just answered it, which is just plug positivity into your ears and allow this to be a positive space of positive thoughts by listening to other people and different perceptions of people that might be doing things you want to even do in your own life.
I think you've got to do that consistently, Marvelous. And I also think that, you've heard me talk about this. You've got to give yourself permission. And this is important. We've got to give ourselves permission to play the long game. There's
Right.
no overnight successes. Okay. Any overnight success that you've ever seen out there has a long story that you're not seeing. And you have to allow those really mundane, boring, monotonous things that we've got to do every single day consistently over a period of time to catch up with the results that we're seeking. You play the long game. Do we look for short term wins? 100%. You break things up into small bite-sized pieces for sure, but you have to allow that piece to play out so that the results can catch up with the effort that you're putting in on a day in and day out basis. And that's persistence. It's chapter 9 of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's book.
Yeah, so just saying again, persistent is definitely the key. Well, as we close out here, I want number one say thank you because you've been just gracious with your time, and
Oh,
people are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation for sure. I have a couple great American underdog questions for you
all
that
right,
are a little
Clark.
more broad. So number one, what's one thing you do today that your younger self wouldn't believe if you told them?
What is one thing I do today to my younger self? Read,
Inter-
100% read.
Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
something that you wouldn't have done when you were younger, huh? No
Nope.
shot. And then now I know that reading is so important to both of us, and, for me,
Mhm.
partially because of you too. If you had a magic cell phone and you could call your younger self and leave them a voicemail, what would you tell your younger self?
Sh- Man, bro, that video just hit me hard when I watched it. Such a great question.
This is tailored to you, right?
You know what? This is going to sound really weird. I don't want this to come off in a weird way. I'd say I love you. I think it's so important for us to be able to look in a mirror and say that, not in a self-absorbed way, but in a way that says that you care about that person. Because I think a lot of times we get so hung up in all of the bullshit in life that we forget to tell ourselves, I love you. I know you might have screwed
Wow.
up. You might have gotten something wrong. You might have made a mistake. You might have hurt somebody and have regretted that, but it doesn't define who you are. And I still love you.
That reminds me of Brian Tracy where he talks about just repeating to yourself, "I like myself. I like myself. I can do it. I like
Yeah.
my." Then you start
And
telling
that's why I said I didn't want it to get like, standing in front of the mirror, giving myself daily affirmations. But if you said to me that I was going to have a telephone call with my like 18, 19-year-old self,
yeah.
I'd just say, slow down. I love you anyway. Slow down. I love you anyway.
What's the biggest piece of advice you would give to somebody right now who might be writing their own underdog story, facing some pretty big trials and tribulations in their own life?
Well, let me say this to you. First of all, I think advice is useless. I think relative experience is priceless. And here's what I would say. I would say very simply, you have to continue to try. You have to continue to put forth the effort. And sometimes you have to do the George Costanza thing, which is the opposite of what you want to do or what you instinctually think you
Sure.
should be doing. I think you just need to take small actions every day. Take that one small action every day at the very least so that you can take a step forward. Even in the face of complete adversity and failure and disappointment, take one small step and then keep taking another one every single day from that point forward. You just can't give up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we close out here, Sandy, what's your favorite part of your own underdog story? And then ultimately, what's next for you?
My favorite part is that it's still going on and
Love
that
it.
it's not over and that I get to continue to do this every single day. And what I look forward to the most is just the fact that I'm cheating father time. I think time is a thief. It's that great duality of time. It's the great benefactor because it grants us all these opportunities, but yet it's also a thief because as it's granting these opportunities to us, it's simultaneously taking away from us, and it's something that we can never get back. And so I just look forward to more time with the people that I care about and that I enjoy being around, especially, my wife and my kids and my family and you're my family. I mean, my
Likewise.
very, very close personal friends.
Love you, man. Where can people find you, Sandy?
SandyCerami.com. Sandy at SandyCerami.com is the easiest way to get me. You know that I answer and respond to every email,
That's
text
right.
message, private message, phone call, whatever the case may be. And we get those. You and I offer that up. That's something that's really unique about what you and I do is we
Yeah.
offer that up to everybody. And a lot of them take advantage of it. And I know you and I are getting those phone calls that most other people don't want to take because if they're willing to show us the trust and respect and confidence to make them, we take them.
Amen to that. Sandy, any last closing thoughts as we close out here?
First, I want to say thank you and tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity that we get to do this together. I mean, there's
Gotcha.
nothing that's perfect out there, but the experience that we've had and the wins that we've been able to put on the board and everything, all of it is incredibly rewarding to me. It's fun. I don't even like to use the word labor, but it's a labor of love
Yeah.
for me to do what we do every single day. And I have been my whole life this guy that's like just meandering his way through life. The fact that I get to do this with you is pretty incredible.
Right back at you, Sandy. You know how much I appreciate it too. So, again, I thank you for being on here, telling your story, being vulnerable. And I think that a lot of people are going to listen into this episode and definitely get a lot of value and then be able to go and find you and even maybe reach out to you to have a conversation because I think that anybody out there that hears this, I think that they will get a lot of insight from being able to have just one conversation with you, if not just listening to this episode alone. So once again, I thank you. This has been another great episode of Great American Underdog Solutions and Success with none other than my man, Sandy Cerami, the Solutionist. And we once again thank you for tuning in. If you found value in this video, please subscribe and share with anybody else who you feel could use listening to my man, the Solutionist here. And once again, thank you for tuning in. We're out.
I got you, buddy.